Hi, and welcome to Sewing with Threads, the monthly podcast by the staff of Threads magazine. I'm Threads editorial director, Sarah McFarland, and I'm joined by staff.
Hi, I'm Carol Frazier, senior technical editor.
Hi, I'm Janine Clegg, managing editor of production.
And our guest today is Liesl Gibson. Hi, Liesl.
Hi, thank you so much for asking me to be on the show. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. We're talking with Liesl from she's in Madrid, Spain, and we're in Newtown, Connecticut, and we're talking via Skype. Now, Liesl is the founder and chief designer of Liesl & Co. Incorporated, a company well known to many home sewing enthusiasts. Liesl produces the Liesl & Co. line of apparel patterns for women through her own company, and she designs the Lisette line of patterns for Butterick. She also designs Oliver & S. children's clothing patterns and the Straight Stitch Society line of small project patterns. Liesl began her career in publishing and finance before eventually returning to school to earn a degree in fashion design from the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. Prior to founding her own pattern business in 2008, she worked as a designer for Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger, and she currently lives in Madrid. A Lisette pattern for Butterick was on the cover of our issue 208. And we have the dress right here. It was very beautiful. Example to sew in rayon, our featured fabric and fabric lab for that issue.
Really drapey. It turned out beautifully.
Yes. So we're going to take a quick break for a message from this episode's sponsor, and we'll be right back to talk to Liesl.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Baby Lock, creators of the Celebrate 4-Thread Serger. The Celebrate includes adjustable manual tensions for perfect stitches on any type of fabric. Jet Air threading threads the Celebrate with the touch of a lever, and the presser foot's 6mm height makes serging on thicker fabrics a breeze. Best of all, you can now buy Celebrate online for $999. Visit babylock.com to find a participating retailer.
And we're back. Before we start talking about pattern design and fit with Liesl, we have our background sewing questions for her. So Liesl, who taught you to sew?
I mostly learned to sew by watching my mom. She sewed for me and my 4 younger sisters when we were growing up, and she never really taught me specifically, but I just watched her really closely. And one summer when I was in college, my family was away on vacation. I had stayed home for a summer job. And I marched myself over to the fabric store and picked out a pattern and some fabric and took it home and made myself a jumper. And then when my family returned home after vacation, I had some questions for my mom, but mostly I knew what I was doing just from having observed and asked questions while she was sewing for us.
That's interesting. I think a lot of people may have similar experiences.
I would imagine.
Yeah. So the next question is, what is your favorite sewing term?
We're all about animals over here at our house, and I used to teach a lot of beginning sewing. Before I started the company, actually, I taught beginning sewing, and so I think my favorite sewing term is the feed dogs. I just think it's such a funny term for a piece of a sewing machine, and it always sparked conversations with my beginning sewists. So then I started referring to the thread take-up lever as the giraffe. And when the giraffe's head was sticking up out of the machine, that was when you threaded it. That was when your needle was at its highest point. So it's all about the animals.
I think that's excellent. If you read the Q&A in the most recent issue, it talks about feed dogs.
I love it.
So you'll know. So what are you currently sewing?
Well, we have our big photo shoot for the spring patterns next weekend. So I am madly sewing samples. I think I counted something like 14 or 15 samples that I have to sew. So it's a week of heavy-duty sewing for me.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're getting ready for your Project Runway debut. What is your favorite fabric to sew?
Honestly, I don't have a favorite. I love all natural fibers. I love wool, cotton, silk, linen. They're all wonderful to me. They all have their own properties, and I really enjoy switching from one to another as well.
Okay, and what do you love most about sewing?
The creative process, really. I love, as a designer, being able to envision something and then actually go ahead and make it. And I love the individuality of sewing as well. The fact that you can make something that fits you perfectly, that's exactly the color or the style that you imagined. And that's like nothing else that anyone else has.
Very understandable. I think that's what our goal is too. We hope, that talking to you and having our readers read threads, they'll learn how to do that also.
Absolutely.
And I think that gives us a nice segue into the topic for our episode. And when I was talking to Liesl in planning her appearance on the podcast, she mentioned how important fit is to her. And Liesl, you mentioned that you really have a passion for fit. And as a pattern designer, I wanted to ask you about the process of bringing a good fit and thinking about fit when you're designing a pattern from scratch. How does that start for you?
Oh, for me, it's so important. When I was in design school, I took draping classes and flat pattern classes, and both of them really helped me to understand what goes into a good fit and the differences in, the amount of ease. For some people the style might prefer more ease in one style than another, or individuals might prefer more ease in their garments than other people. And so all of those things sort of go into my work. When we first started designing women's clothing, a lot of our customers learned to sew by sewing our children's patterns.
Yes.
And so I really wanted to hold their hand through the process. So the first few patterns that we put out were not very fit specific. They were more loose fitting, just to kind of help people gain confidence in their sewing so they could focus on the process and hopefully get an end result that they were relatively happy with without really needing to get into the nitty-gritty of the fit itself. And I like to think that I've been kind of holding our customers' hands through the process, so that recently we've been releasing more patterns that are more fitted. And I've been doing a lot more with princess seams and different ways that we give various cup sizes in the same pattern whenever we're able to. So I'm looking for ways to help our customers get a good fit as easily as they can. With the princess seams, they can really pin to adjust the seams, take them in a little, take them out a little. And just really, I'm trying to make the process easier for everyone.
This collection that you have coming up it would be for spring 2021?
2020.
Oh, 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah. That has some of these elements you've been talking about. You're bringing more fitting elements to it.
These patterns, not so much. The last couple seasons that I've done have been more fitted garments. This particular season, I'm focusing more on knits because I've noticed that a lot of our customers still have a little trepidation when it comes to sewing with knits. So again, I want to kind of hold their hands through this process. And both of the knit patterns that we're releasing they can be sewn entirely with a sewing machine. You don't need a serger. In fact, I recommend that you don't use a serger just because of the way that they're constructed. And there again, you can baste it together, check the fit, let it in, take it out a little bit, again, to adjust the fits to your own preferences.
And Liesl, do you have the opportunity with your designs? You have your own pattern company, but with all your designs, do you have some input on the instructions so that you could share some of this sort of fitting guidance in them?
To a large degree, yeah. I write all the instructions for the Liesl & Co. patterns, the Oliver & S, and the straight stitch. I write those and illustrate those entirely, so that's all from me. When it comes to designing for, say, Butterick, I'm not writing them, but I always see them before they go to press, and so I can add things in or make suggestions and request changes as I need, or as I feel is better for our customer as well. Yeah.
Oh, good. That's important. I think that many new sewers can sometimes be discouraged if they sew something and don't achieve the fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't feel that I experienced that too much when I was at first sewing as a teen, but I think that I had some good guidance, doing skirts, elastic waists. Did you ever experience that as a beginning sewer?
Myself personally, not so much, because I'm pretty close to our sample size, and so I could pretty much sew right out of the envelope, which was lovely for me. But when I started teaching sewing workshops, it very quickly became apparent to me the challenges that a lot of women were facing. And so I started doing very intensive workshops. And unfortunately, I don't do them much now because I'm living in Europe. I don't really have the opportunity. But the workshops that I was doing were very fit specific. And really, the idea was really to help women conquer their fear of fit and sort of understand their body and understand some basics, fairly simple changes they could make in order to get a good fit on their garments. So just essentially to take away the fear factor when you're approaching a pattern.
Do you sort of observe any particular common fit issues and then build that into your pattern design?
Yeah, I was doing a workshop a few years ago here in Europe, and I realized that it really would be helpful to have more princess seams in more patterns, just because to do a full bust adjustment, it doesn't always work for all women. It can be challenging if you're quite full busted. I think it can be really challenging to get a good fit.
Yes.
And so I started really thinking about what patterns would lend themselves well to princess seams, while it was still being, fashionable and still being, well, maybe not trendy, but stylish, but would allow women to get an easier fit. I just find princess seams to be much easier sort of to intuit than to do a full bust adjustment on a darted pattern.
Do you find that women tend to like tighter clothes these days? As, you were talking about ease before, and do you find that that's the case? Were you trying to answer that issue a little bit with the knit patterns you're talking about releasing?
I wouldn't necessarily say that women prefer a tighter fit. What I do find is that a lot of beginning sewers tend to overfit a pattern. They tend to think it needs to be tighter than it actually needs to be. And then when you sort of demonstrate that, it still looks good with a few inches of ease, that ease might seem like a lot when you're looking at the pattern or when you have a muslin on. But once you actually start moving and wearing that pattern, a couple inches of ease is not all that much when it comes down to it. And I think once they sort of understand that, then they tend to sort of take another look at their closet of the clothes that they own and their favorite clothes, and sort of reevaluate fit and to a large degree. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It does to me, because I think people tend to want to buy a small size when they buy clothing.
Yeah.
And so they're always squeezing themselves into something that's just maybe could be one size bigger and look a little bit better. And when
That's
you sew,
true.
you don't have to deal with that. I mean, you can, but they become used to very tight fitting or very, very little ease in their garments. And they
That's very
may
true.
take it into the clothes that they make. And learning that it's possible to wear a few more inches of ease and still look great is a great lesson.
Yeah, I think the other side of the spectrum on that, though, is that if you are very full busted, you might be really accustomed to wearing a size that's too big for you, just in order
Yes,
to
right.
get a fit around the middle. And so then you feel maybe a little revealed, or suddenly there's a body underneath all that fabric, and that can be a little intimidating to women as well. So
Yeah.
it goes both ways, I think.
Yeah.
Liesl, do you notice any distinct differences in the fit preferences between women in Europe and women in the U.S.?
Good question. I think maybe being here in Spain, I think maybe women might tend to emphasize their feminine curves a little bit more than, well, I'm from Manhattan, so more than New Yorkers in any case. They tend to, I think, dress a little more femininely here, more dresses and blouses and skirts. Whereas, especially in New York, we're all super casual there. So, a lot of jeans and not so fitted garments or very garments that have a lot more ease in them from a design perspective. So there is a little bit of a difference. Yeah.
What are the fabric stores like in Madrid? Sorry, that's a little off the fitting topic, but
Not at
I'm
all.
curious.
I honestly, I'm a little disappointed. I'm spoiled coming from New York.
Yeah.
If I need a fabric, I know where to go and get it in New York. And here, I find that the natural fibers tend to be a little pricey, like considerably more pricey than I'm accustomed to paying in the States. And there's a lot more polyester and rayon and the fibers that I'm not quite so excited about, so I can leave a little disgusted sometimes. Now, having said that, I have found some lovely fabrics, and you've never seen such a spectacular selection of lace as they have in the stores here. The dressy fabrics are amazing. But yeah, I get a little frustrated not being able to find the natural fibers as much as I would like to. Boy, I sound so spoiled.
Well, what about the quality of the fabrics? You know, the selection may be more limited and more expensive, but is the quality any better or worse, do you find?
Well, the man-made fibers tend to be just nothing wonderful. The natural fibers, I guess they would be comparable or possibly to some degree better than in the States. But, you know, even in New York, we have so many European fabrics there that it's, right. I wouldn't say there's a huge difference.
Okay. All right. Good.
It always sounds so glamorous to go fabric shopping in Europe, but I guess it depends on the area.
Liesl, when you're designing patterns, are you thinking of your pattern line as the basis of a wardrobe? Are you planning things that can go together and mix and match in any way? Or do you kind of think of a new thing each season and just do a couple things that seem to fit the current trend?
No, I'm very much about the continuous wardrobe, really having those core elements that fit into your clothing. I have clothes that I've owned for over 20 years that I still wear on a regular basis. And for me, it really is about having those basics and having items that are special within your basics, but definitely having items that work with each other, that you can wear many different ways, wear over and over again. To me, that's crucial, especially now, you know, in this environment where we're really talking about fast fashion and, you know, the waste, the amount of clothing that we're throwing out as a culture and the amount that's just not worn that much. To me, it's really, really important that we're wearing and buying the best quality and with the intention of keeping it and using it for a long time.
So do you design more, would you say more classic styles then with that in mind?
Yeah, I would. Now, having said that, I definitely try to add special elements in there to make them not boring basics. But yeah, definitely I'm looking for more of a classic silhouette, more items that you'll reach for again and again. To me, that's really important. If you're going to invest the time and the money in sewing something, you might as well have it be something that you're not going to be tired of in one season. You're going to be continuing to look for it, you know, on a regular basis.
Liesl, that was something that I think made us choose the Butterick Lisette pattern. I think it's 6168 for the 208 cover. That just that little neckline detail that the dress had was wonderful in the rayon. And there was just a little bit of draping and gathering too. So
it turned out beautifully. I was really happy I was surprised to see it.
yeah. And I was wondering, can you tell us in your upcoming patterns, are there any particular details that you could share that you're going to have there?
I've been thinking a lot about wrap details. So we're doing a little bit of pleating and gathering in a sense, and sort of a faux wrap look on one of the dresses that's coming out. And then the newest Butterick pattern, the Lisette for Butterick that should be coming out any day now, it's a little bit younger style. I really had my daughter in mind when I was designing it, but it also has sort of a wrap style that ties or yeah, it's a little, I guess I'm just kind of thinking about the adjustability in a sense, you know, being able to tie something a little tighter.
Ties, gathers. I also feel there's a little flexibility in the fit and, you know, even from day to day, you can adjust the fit on yourself for how you want to look. Yeah.
Do you have a big lunch?
Yeah. And who is your customer that you have in mind? Now, you said that, you know, you worked on a particular dress. You were thinking of your daughter. What type of women do you typically think of, or do you have a whole group that you think of?
You know, when I was in design school, one of my teachers was talking to us about the mark of a good designer. And one of the things he said was that a really good designer should be able to design for anyone. So often you'll hear a designer talk about, this is my muse. I try not to do that. I try really to mix things up a little bit, largely because I don't want to be designing for any one person. I want to have our patterns have a broader appeal. So I really think about a variety of our customers. I too tend to go and ask our customers, what are you looking for? What are you thinking about? We do a lot of, on Fridays, I often ask a question. We call it our sewing small talk. And so I'll ask a question about, like a week or two ago, I was asking, what's your favorite fabric to sew? And what fabric do you hate sewing, or would you never sew? And those sorts of questions really help me also when I'm thinking about a design. So I'm not thinking necessarily about one person or one category of person. I'm more thinking about the people that I've had in my workshop and the challenges that they've presented, or the frustrations that they've expressed. I'm thinking about the chit chat that's happened on maybe one of our Facebook groups, or if I read a blog post when someone has sewn a pattern of ours and maybe they ran into a problem, or they had a frustration. All of that kind of plays into my design. So I'm really thinking about, or trying to think about, our customer as a whole. I mean, I can't design for everyone, obviously, but I really do try to, one season I might design more for a particular body type or a particular silhouette, maybe a particular age group, and then another season I might mix it around a little bit, just because I don't want it to be exclusive or to eliminate anyone. I really want to be as inclusive as we can be.
I wonder if you had that in mind when you came up with the Straight Stitched Society manifesto. I was taking a look at the 10 points you had in there recently, and I love
Those were
8 and
fun.
9. I have to share them with everyone. Number 8 is, no matter what happens, remember, it's only fabric. And the 9th is, if someone asks, did you make that? Say yes, proudly, and leave it at that, no matter how much you fudged along the way. Oh, those are wonderful.
My grandma used to say to me, people would stop her and say, oh, did you? Because my grandmother was a very well-known teacher of needle arts primarily. And if she had purchased something that she was wearing and someone asked her, did you make it? She would say, no, but I could have.
Yeah.
I like
always
that.
love that.
Yeah, we use that sometimes too, because I think people think we're always wearing something we made, and unfortunately, we don't have as much time to sew as we would like, or as
know.
anybody believes. So
So
often
true.
we're not.
Yes. Yes, I've learned so many techniques that I want to try, and I don't get a chance to. But
Yes.
the just stopping after, yes, I made this, is wonderful, because I have a tendency here, if Carol or Janine notice something that I made, I will say, and I had this problem and that problem,
Yes.
because I feel that they're going to notice it anyways.
We are not going
Absolutely.
to notice
You
it.
nitpick your own work. It's so true. So
Yeah,
true.
I've actually tried to come up with a different approach to it, which is yes, and see how I improved upon the original design.
That's great. I love
You
that. I'll have to
spin it
remember that one.
positively if you can.
Absolutely.
Well, I wonder, though, if one of those fudged problems ever affected how you came up with the design, or how you came up with the solution in a pattern you were working on.
Yeah, a number of times. When we were still living in New York, we had a couple of employees. Now I work pretty much alone. I work at home. It's a totally different environment. But back then, we would be fiddling around. I remember there was one style in particular. I think it's called the pinwheel dress in our Oliver and S line. And I remember we made the dress. I had a drawing, and then we made up the pattern and put it on the dress form, and it was too short, or maybe it was too long. I forget which one. But in any case, we ended up realizing that if we layered it, if we put a shorter tunic over a longer strappy dress, almost like a slip dress, that it made this really cute silhouette that was entirely different from my original design. But I was so much happier with it in the end. And it was just, by chance, we just happened to notice that by layering the two, it was really adorable. So yeah, it definitely happens. That's one of the things I love about doing my own designing and doing my own pattern making, is that I really have that opportunity to play. Whereas, if I'm sending a sketch off to someone else, I don't always have the time or the luxury of continuing to work on a design until I'm really happy with it.
Well, that's great. Love it.
Do you have sewing friends, a sewing community in Madrid?
Kind of. I have a couple of friends here. They don't live in Madrid, unfortunately, but there is a sewing network here. A very good friend of mine lives near Barcelona, and so I see her occasionally. And I definitely, if I'm stuck on a fabric choice, for example, when I was looking for knits and I just could not find knits for the season, then I call her and I ask her for recommendations. So, but there is a pretty good sewing network here. I wouldn't say it's as big as in the States or in Australia, but there is definitely an active sewing network here. And I live really close to the fabric stores and the trim stores, so I can pop over there anytime. And I've made friends with a lot of the people there. So that's helpful also.
Well, this is also a little bit off topic, but what kind of patterns are available for people who are sewing in Europe or in Spain? And are there sewing magazines? And I'm not saying this because we're from Threads. I'm just kind of wondering. I know that in Germany and Northern Europe, people use Berta magazine a lot, but
Berta's very big here as well. Yeah. And what I learned actually shortly after we moved here, which is 4.5 years ago, I was asked to go to a trade show in Italy and was really surprised by the reaction of the customers in Italy. They didn't know what to make of an independent pattern maker. They kept confusing me with Berta. And it turned out that the tradition of sewing in Italy, and to a large degree here in Spain also, is that when you learn to sew, you also learn to make your own sewing patterns. So there's a really steep learning curve. If you want to sew, you're not just picking up a pattern and sewing that pattern, you're learning to draft the pattern yourself. And so I think, much like in the States, sewing kind of fell off for a while. And now a lot of the Spanish and Italian customers, especially the younger women, are discovering these indie pattern companies and discovering that they don't need to start from 10, they can start from 0 and work their way up, rather than learning everything from the very start. So that's made it a little less intensive to get started with sewing as a hobby.
One of the challenges for independent pattern companies is the grading issue. You come up with a design and then you have to grade it to all the sizes, the many sizes that your customers are. And I'm wondering how you deal with that, because especially, as I said, for the independent pattern companies, you don't have a staff to do that necessarily.
Right.
So
yeah.
how do you deal with that?
I use industry-specific software. I use a pattern making software called Optitech, and it's extremely expensive. So it was a pretty massive investment on our part to get started with it. But it allows me to do the grading. It allows me to adjust patterns. It allows me to decide how to nest the different sizes so that it's easier to see the cut lines. Sometimes when you finish grading something, the cut lines, at the neckline will all be crisscrossing each other, and it gets really complicated. So this software has really allowed me more flexibility where I can go in and adjust individual lines if I need to, but it also allows me to apply industry standard grade rules. I mean, there's not really a standard. I shouldn't say it's an industry standard, but to a certain degree, there are standard grade rules for women's. And so I have a lot of flexibility with the software that helps me quite a bit in the pattern making and the grading process.
Do you start out with a block or sloper that you've designed yourself based on sort of your understanding of your customer?
Yeah. You can't really have just one block when it comes to pattern making. Every garment style sort of needs to have its own block. It's different. A block is different than a sloper. A sloper is a pattern that I'm sure you know that fits your body very precisely, and then you develop blocks off of that. So some blocks will have more ease than other blocks. You might have more of a dropped shoulder, a dropped sleeve on some blocks. So we do start with blocks. And then occasionally I'll come up with a new style that needs a completely new block. So yeah, we're always working off of those blocks and then developing more where need be. So yeah. I'm so sorry. Do you want me? Can I go put her away for a minute?
I think we should just leave that in,
Okay.
because Liesl, it's been so wonderful talking to you. But I can wrap us up now, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again sometime.
Yeah.
And we're really looking forward to seeing your new patterns too. Thank you so much for being on with
Thank you
us.
so much for inviting me. It was really fun to talk with you.
Thank you for listening. Follow Threads on social media and visit threadsmagazine.com to view show notes for this episode. While you're on the site, check out Threads Insider, our online membership with exclusive access to expert sewing techniques. Until next time, keep on sewing with Threads.